One thing unites the two pieces of George Harrison's from 1967, the influence of Indian music. As he commented in Anthology, he lost interest in being fab at that point after becoming infatuated with the country and its culture. "I just got back from India," George said, "and my heart was still out there." His Pepper song, Within You Without You, is centered around a single note drone that essentially stayed in one chord the entire time, while its vocal melody line jumped and dipped around it. He used the same pattern in Blue Jay Way, with the melody line lingering in the key of C the entire time, although Blue Jay Way has a more western flair to it, abandoning all tablas and sitars in favor of drums, keyboards, trippy studio effects, and Beatle harmonies. In August 1967, George, his wife Patty, Neil Aspinall and Magic Alex took a plane from Britain to California, mostly to watch Ravi Shankar's Hollywood Bowl concert and see Patty's sister, Jenny. While there, Jenny, who lived in Haight-Ashbury, urged them to travel to San Francisco to see the hippie culture they had heard so much about. While they accepted this invitation, George later denounced them as bums and full of horrible spotty dropout kids on drugs. "We walked down the street," George related, "and I was being treated like the Messiah. I became really afraid because the concoction that the DJ had given me was having an effect. It certainly showed me what was really happening in the drug culture. It wasn't what I thought. Spiritual awakenings and being artistic, it was like alcoholism, like any other addiction." George would later share his disillusionment about Haight-Ashbury with John. Prior to this, John and George were the biggest proponents of acid in the group. The Beatles shortly after would publicly denounce LSD and other drugs in favor of transcendental meditation under Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, whose seminar they attended in late August in Bangor, Wales. On arrival in Los Angeles on August 1st, they were driven to a small rented cottage with a pool on Blue Jay Way, a street high in the Hollywood Hills above Sunset Boulevard. Derek Taylor, formerly the Beatles press officer and now a publicist working in Los Angeles, was due to visit them on their first night in town. Derek Taylor revealed, "They'd ring and say, 'We're here.' So I asked him, 'Where are you?' 'In Blue Jay Way,' he replied. 'Where's that?' I asked. 'I don't know,' he replied, 'somewhere up in the hills.' So I said to him, 'Never mind, I'll ask a policeman. There are plenty of them around.' So I set out to find them, and while he was waiting with jet lag and Patty, he sat down at an organ in the hall and started, 'Please don't be long. My friends have lost their way. There's a fog in LA. They'll ask a policeman on the street. There's so many there to meet.' By the time I had reached them, the song was virtually intact. Of course, at the time I felt very bad because here were these two wretchedly jet-lagged people and I was about 2 hours late to meet them. I felt really knackered with the flight," George explained, "but I didn't want to go to sleep until he came. To keep myself awake, just as a joke to pass the time while I waited, I wrote a song about waiting for him in Blue Jay Way. There was a little Hammond organ in the corner of this house, which I hadn't noticed until then, so I messed around on it, and the song came. The mood is also slightly Indian." The Hammond organ George wrote the song on is still in the Upland home at 1567 Blue Jay Way, and the owner claims that the last time he plugged it in, it started smoking. The property was up for sale for $4,599,000 in 2012. Following a lot of rehearsal, the written track, featuring George on organ, John on second organ, Paul on bass and Ringo on drums, was captured in only one take, with overdubs of cello, backing vocals, and tambourine. Author Nicholas Schaffner describes Blue Jay Way as the first Harrison-written Beatles recording, on which he adapted some of his Indian-derived ideas to a more Western setting through the choice of musical instruments. In the arrangement, the Hammond organ recreates the drone of a tambora, while a cello acts as an Indian sarod. It was during the recording of Blue Jay Way that Ken Scott worked as a balance engineer with the Beatles, due to their previous engineer Geoff Emerick choosing to step down at this point. Later on, Scott made it big in the 70s as a producer, working with artists like David Bowie, Supertramp, Devo, and others. Blue Jay Way was to George what, in recording terms, Strawberry Fields Forever or I Am the Walrus were to John, in that it seized upon all the studio trickery and technical advancements of 66 and 67 and captured them in one song, like flanging, audio delay effect, sound signal rotation via a Leslie speaker, and reverse tapes. The film sequence for Blue Jay Way was shot mainly at RAF West Malling, an Air Force base near Maidstone in Kent, with the scene designed to recreate a typically smog-ridden Los Angeles, featuring George sitting on a pavement and playing a chalk-drawn keyboard. The other part of the sequence, with all four Beatles, was filmed at Ringo's house in Weybridge, Surrey. Regarding the house on Blue Jay Way, George was actually not the only one who wrote a well-known song there. Paul Simon allegedly created Bridge Over Troubled Water in the same house in the Hollywood Hills, even recording percussion parts for Cecilia as well. Perhaps there's something about that house after all.